moral terrain of abortion. Abortion is one of the most emotionally and philosophically charged issues in public discourse. Beneath the slogans and sound bites lie deep moral fault lines, questions about autonomy, personhood, harm, justice, and the nature of life itself. To navigate this terrain, we've constructed two rebuttal ladders, one for the pro-choice position and one for the pro-life position. Each ladder escalates from intuitive moral claims to sophisticated philosophical frameworks, offering a structured way to engage, challenge, and refine our ethical intuitions. This isn't about winning a debate. It's about clarifying the friction zones where values collide, where thresholds shift, and where moral reasoning must stretch to accommodate complexity. Whether you lean toward bodily autonomy or the sanctity of life, these ladders invite you to examine not just what you believe, but why. Let's climb. Does the deprivation account best capture the wrongness of death? Let's review. See what your intuitions say. Imagine this. You must endure 9 months of the flu in order to allow a being to experience 1 second of a future like ours. Let's call this flow. Alternatively, you could unplug yourself from this being, preventing it from having that 1 second. What aligns with your intuition? Would you unplug yourself? Would you allow your loved one to unplug themselves? Now let's shift the scenario. Suppose we reconstruct the being using a device that breaks it down to its molecular parts and reassembles it while you are still plugged in. You just have to press a button. Do you press it? Let's raise the stakes. This being will now have not just 1 second of flow, but 75 years if you press the button. It seems clear we should press it. But why? There's no longer harm. The being gets more time. Yet something feels off. We've irreversibly destroyed a numerically identical being and created a qualitatively identical one. We don't want to say we can unalive beings just because a copy exists somewhere. So what factors are doing the moral work? Let's return to the original case. A being will have 1 second of experience, and you or a loved one must endure 9 months of the flu. Time seems to be doing a lot of work here, both in the duration of harm and the richness of experience. Is it time alone? No. It seems an infinite amount of time can pass, but if nothing occurs, if there's a kind of suspended state of being, then the wrongness lies only in the loss of existence, not in the deprivation of future goods. The deprivation of a future like ours may imply that the more future one could have experienced, the greater the wrongness of its loss. But that quickly devolves into a time-relative interest account of harm. From the deprivation account's perspective, what matters is the loss of any valuable good. Flow becomes an index for unspecified valuable goods, often referred to as hopes, dreams, and a series of mental states. Interestingly, these are all seemingly related to the mind. So any amount of these goods for any amount of time constitutes a deprivation and is therefore wrong to deny. If you've seen Naruto, you'll recall Itachi's Mangekyo Sharingan and the dreaded Tsukuyomi technique. Time is experienced by sentient beings not in clock ticks, but in felt durations. A week of flu can feel like a month. So we might say one of two things. That 1 second is incredibly valuable to the being, and they experience a rich, meaningful moment. Or that 9 months of flu is like being trapped in a Tsukuyomi enduring prolonged suffering. I have my biases here, but I won't declare them. I ask you to consider what your intuitions say. Now, what if instead of 1 second, the being could live for 1 day, 1 month, 1 year, or even a decade? How much life is the right threshold to justify enduring the flu? A flu isn't permanent, so some might say any amount of flu is worth it. Others might argue for proportionality. If the being will live 9 months, then someone should endure 9 months of flu. Still others might say, I have no idea how long the being will live. This uncertainty means I must do whatever it takes, regardless of whether the being will have just 1 second of flow, or it is unlikely or merely possible. I must endure the flu, along with my loved ones for 9 months or even 9 years if that is what it takes. Relevant moral factors in the flu-flow thought experiment. Deprivation of valuable goods. The wrongness of death is tied to the loss of future experiences, hopes, dreams, and mental states. Even 1 second of rich experience may constitute a morally significant deprivation. 2. Duration and quality of experience. Time is not morally neutral. Its felt duration, for example, suffering through flu, matters. A short but meaningful life, flow, may outweigh a long but painful sacrifice. 3. Harm to the sacrificing agent. 9 months of flu represents significant suffering. Moral weight depends on whether the harm is temporary, bearable, or transformative. 4. Identity and replacement. Destroying a numerically identical being and replacing it with a qualitatively identical one raises ethical concerns. The irreversibility of destruction matters, even if the copy is functionally perfect. 5. Thresholds of justification. How much flow justifies how much flu? Is there a proportionality principle, for example, 9 months of flu for 9 months of flow? Or is any amount of flow worth any amount of flu? 6. Uncertainty and moral risk. Not knowing how long the being will live introduces moral ambiguity. Some may argue for precautionary endurance, endure the flu even if flu is only possible or unlikely. 7. Experiential richness versus clock time. Sentient experience is measured in felt richness, not just chronological length. 1 second of flow might be morally weightier than a year of dull existence. 8. Moral intuition and bias. Personal intuitions shape judgments about sacrifice, value, and identity. Biases may influence whether one prioritizes the being's future or the agent's suffering. Pro-life rebuttal ladder. Each rung builds on the last, moving from intuitive moral claims to more sophisticated metaphysical and legal arguments. Rung 1. Intuitive moral status of the fetus. It feels wrong to end a life that is growing. Many people intuitively feel that abortion ends a developing human life. The presence of a heartbeat, movement, or ultrasound image evokes moral concern. Rung 2. Human life begins at conception. From conception, the fetus is a distinct, living human organism. Scientifically, the zygote has a unique DNA sequence and begins a continuous process of development. The fetus is not part of the pregnant person's body, it is biologically distinct. Rung 3. Equal moral worth. All human beings deserve equal moral consideration, regardless of size, development, or dependency. Moral worth should not depend on age, ability, or location, for example, womb versus outside. Using sentience or self-awareness as criteria risks excluding newborns, the disabled, or the unconscious. Rung 4. Bodily rights have limits. Bodily autonomy doesn't justify killing an innocent human being. We restrict bodily autonomy in other cases, for example, child neglect, drunk driving. The violinist analogy fails because pregnancy results from a natural biological relationship, not artificial attachment. Rung 5. The deprivation of a future like ours. Abortion deprives the fetus of a valuable future, hopes, dreams, relationships. Based on Don Marquis' argument, what makes killing wrong is the loss of a future like ours. Fetuses have the same kind of future we do, even if they are not yet aware of it. Rung 6. Moral uncertainty favors caution. If we are unsure about fetal personhood, we should err on the side of protecting life. In cases of moral doubt, it is safer to avoid potentially killing a person. Analogous to hunting in fog, if you are unsure whether it is a deer or a person, you do not shoot. Rung 7. Social justice for the unborn. The most vulnerable members of the human family deserve protection. The fetus is voiceless, powerless, and dependent, precisely the kind of being justice should protect. A consistent ethic of care includes the unborn alongside other marginalized groups. Rung 8. Legal and cultural precedent. Laws shape moral norms, and protecting prenatal life affirms human dignity. Legal protections for the unborn exist in many cultures and legal systems. Abortion restrictions can coexist with compassionate support for women. These are not mutually exclusive. Pro-choice rebuttal ladder. Each rung builds on the last, moving from intuitive responses to more sophisticated ethical, legal, and philosophical arguments. Rung 1. Bodily autonomy, core intuition. No one should be forced to use their body to sustain another's life. Even if we grant that the fetus is a person, no person has the right to use another's body without consent. Analogous to the famous violinist thought experiment, Judith Jarvis Thomson, being plugged into someone doesn't grant you the right to stay plugged in. Rung 2. Consent to risk does not equal consent to outcome. Consent to sex is not consent to pregnancy. Engaging in sex does not mean forfeiting bodily autonomy. We don't say someone who drives consents to being hit by a drunk driver. Risk is not moral consent. Rung 3. Moral relevance of sentience and consciousness. What matters morally is the capacity for experience, not mere biological life. Early fetuses lack sentience, self-awareness, or the capacity to suffer. Moral status is tied to mental states, not DNA or potential. Rung 4. The asymmetry of dependency. The fetus is uniquely dependent on one specific person's body. Unlike born children who can be cared for by others, a fetus relies exclusively on one person's body. This unique dependency makes forced gestation a special kind of coercion. Rung 5. The deprivation account doesn't override autonomy. Even if abortion deprives a fetus of a future, that doesn't justify violating bodily rights. The deprivation account, death is bad because it deprives one of a valuable future, doesn't entail that others must preserve that future at great personal cost. We don't force people to donate organs, even if it would save a life. Rung 6. Moral uncertainty favors the living. In cases of moral uncertainty, we should prioritize the rights of the conscious, autonomous person. When we're unsure about fetal personhood, we should err on the side of protecting those whose moral status is certain. The pregnant person's rights, suffering, and future are not hypothetical. Rung 7. Structural and social context. Abortion bans don't reduce abortions, they make them more dangerous. Empirical evidence shows that criminalizing abortion leads to unsafe procedures, not fewer abortions. Reproductive freedom is essential for gender equality, economic justice, and public health. Rung 8. The ethics of moral pluralism. In a pluralistic society, the state should not impose one metaphysical view of personhood. Reasonable people disagree about when life gains moral status. In a liberal democracy, the law should protect freedom of conscience and bodily integrity, not enforce one religious or philosophical doctrine. Summary. We explored two structured ethical ladders, pro-choice and pro-life, each escalating in complexity from intuitive moral claims to sophisticated philosophical and legal arguments. The pro-choice rebuttal ladder emphasized bodily autonomy, the limits of moral obligation, the role of sentience, and the importance of protecting conscious agents in morally uncertain contexts. The pro-life rebuttal ladder focused on the continuity of human life from conception, equal moral worth regardless of development, the deprivation of a future like ours, and the ethical imperative to protect the most vulnerable. Both ladders reveal deep friction zones, autonomy versus dependency, felt experience versus biological continuity, and moral certainty versus precautionary ethics. These tensions echo your earlier flu-flow thought experiment, where time, harm, identity, and experiential richness all compete for moral primacy. Otro. In the end, these ladders aren't just tools for debate, they're mirrors for intuition. They help us clarify what we value, what we fear, and where we draw our moral thresholds. Whether you're mapping deprivation, modeling identity, or reframing sacrifice, the real work lies in translating friction into insight.